Hey, what's going on, everybody? Welcome back to another episode of the Fortified Life podcast. I'm your host, Jason Davis, aka Mr. Fortify. Every single week, I have the opportunity to interview CEOs, coaches, authors, speakers who are passionate about putting God back in business and permeating all throughout their life. And it's no different this week. Before I bring our guests on today, let me introduce him to you. Dr. Roger Parrott earned his PhD from the University of Maryland in Higher Education Administration. Dr. Parrott is a third generation college president and was one of America's youngest college presidents, first elected at age 34. He has served on various boards and was chair of the 2004 Forum for World Evangelization, hosted by the Lausanne Committee for World Evangelization. Dr. Parrott is the author of The Long View, Lasting Strategies for Rising Leaders and Opportunity Leadership. Stop Planning and Start Leading. His wife, Mary Lou, earned her PhD in English and is a professor at Belhaven. They have two adult children who graduated from Belhaven. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome to the Fortified Life, Dr. Roger Parrott. Dr. Parrott, how's it going?
You are too nice to have me on your program. I really appreciate it. And some of the people I know are big fans of yours. So when I got the invitation, I was really pleased. Really.
Indeed. Well, Dr. Parrott, it's wonderful to have you on the show. Big fan of your book. We'll certainly get to that in a little bit. So, folks, you stay tuned. We're going to unpack Dr. Parrott's book, which I thoroughly enjoyed. But before we get to that, Dr. Parrott, you've been serving in higher education for a number of years. And for the people who may not know you, maybe they've been living under a rock for the last several years, but we know in 2024, you just didn't wake up doing everything you did now. So kind of take us on a trip down memory lane of how you got to where you are today.
Yeah, I never planned to do this at all. It's when I look back at it, I can't believe that God sent me down this path because I was not a great student in college. I was kind of majoring in sports and my wife to be Mary Lou and but then the academic engine kicked in, and I think a lot of that was because of Mary Lou mostly. But when it did, and kind of went down the path of advanced higher ed to a master's and doctorate, it kind of made sense to look at higher ed. I never thought about a presidency, but my father and my grandfather were both college presidents. So it made sense. I was comfortable in that arena, grew up in it and the whole thing, but never thought at age 34 I'd start this. I'm now starting my 36th year as I've been a college president more years of my life than I've not been a college. That's weird.
Wow.
That's really weird. And I don't look that old, right? Promise me I don't look that old. So, and I love it. And it's a dramatically changing field. It's a remarkable field. It's you get to work with energetic young people. You get who are idealistic. You get to work with faculty who are really smart in what they do, and you get to run your own city on a campus. And I got my own football team, so it doesn't get any better than that.
There you go. Especially the football part, right, Dr.
Yeah, exactly.
Parrott?
Yeah, we won a conference last year.
Dr. Parrott, you have a great deal of experience, and then you talked about just the lineage from a family perspective. In 2024, what is it like to be a president of a university today? With some of you talked about how there's always things that are changing, but in 2024, what is it like to be president of a university?
I think it's unusual right now because we're dealing with a generation of students who came through COVID.
Mm.
And first of all, they got shortchanged in their education. They got all the expectations pulled off of them, and it just kind of encouraged to kind of coast ahead and helping them. But they still have a desire for their life. They still feel God's purpose in them. They still want to do something significant, but they haven't had a lot of the support that they need to get there. And so that's why I really love this next group of students who are coming up through the ranks because in many ways, it's very fresh compared to what it's been in the past. So you've got that going on. But then, a lot of what we do at Belhaven is for adult students who are going online, graduate students and master's degrees and doctoral programs. And I love working with those students because a lot of them, they're hitting a dead end in their job, or they've hit a financial problem and they know it's not going to get fixed. They know they've got to do something different. And for them, it's a make or break time in their life. And so they're coming back to school with when they get kids at home, they're doing it online, they're working like crazy. I love cheering them on and helping them on and providing an education that makes the education fulfilling in theirs, because we're teaching everything from a foundation of godly truth and grace all the way through. And so, higher ed's in a tough spot, though. Nationally, there's a lot of strange things going on in higher ed. But for those of us who are committed to Christian higher education, I think there's never been a more remarkable time, because the single best discipleship tool of the church is Christian higher education. Your church can have a discipleship program and encourage you to read a book or come to a discussion or whatever. Man, I got them. They've got to read the book. They got to write the paper. They got to have the discussion. They can't get out of it. So it's great. And we help them to drill down to the things in life that matter most in their faith, and walk with God and see the world as God designed it.
Wow. Dr. Parrott, I feel inspired to enroll right now just with what you said. You
Hey,
talked
our,
about,
our
yeah.
MBA program in entrepreneurship was just named by Forbes as one of the top 10 programs in the country. So
Oh, okay.
we're
Wow.
pretty proud of that. Yeah, it's a very unique entrepreneurship program.
Wow.
Masters.
Dr. Perry, you mentioned a couple of things. You talked about students who lived through the pandemic, and then those students maybe transitioning or coming back to get a degree, and knowing that, being able to handle these situations on the fly. This kind of teeing up a little bit of conversation for your book, but what were conversations like with you and the faculty and your leadership on how to best serve students in this present dispensation?
Well, I'm glad that the Lord had spent 20 years preparing me to get rid of planning, because when COVID hit, nobody had a plan. You didn't have a
Mm.
plan. I didn't have a plan. We all were flying blind. And it was a great thing, because there was more innovation, more creativity, more direct line service that came out of COVID. Now, all the bad stuff is there, and I don't discount that at all. In fact, my daughter has long COVID, been in bed for 4.5 years. So I lived that. But when you take away the bad stuff, COVID forced us all in leadership to a flexibility and a dependency on God we'd never had before. So, yeah, we did a lot of things. We flipped 750 classes to online within 1 week. We had
Wow.
dancers learning from home. I mean, they're doing this stuff in their bedroom and their living room, and that's not easy to do. It's kind of remarkable what we did. But we did some other creative things coming out of that, and one of them was, well, in fact, it happened just before COVID, but it kind of kicked in during COVID. For our traditional students, the one who come and live on campus, and part of the teams and all that stuff, we put in a deal where they could do a double major, and if that double major pushed them into the fifth year, that they could come for tuition free the fifth year. And I did
Mm.
that because we're huge in the arts. We're like the top Christian college in the world in the arts. But a lot of our arts families were afraid of majoring in the arts, thinking, well, what am I going to do? Yeah, I'm really glad you can sing or you can dance, but what are you really going to do for a job? And so, I got dancers who are double majoring in business or biology or whatever it may be now, and they can do, and all our students can do that, but we made that decision in about 3 weeks, probably, to
Wow.
to put that into place. But it was because we had built a culture of capturing opportunities before that. And then after the second year of COVID, just one other illustration. After the second year of COVID, I mean, 1 year was terrible. The second year was like, man, students are coming in, their heads are down, they got no hope for the future. We got to do something to get them looking up. And we decided, well, let's give every student in our traditional program who's having to work with these limitations, let's give them a free master's degree when they graduate. And so we did. And it's been great. And I think part of the reason my football team won the conference championship last year is I had about uh, 23 players on a team who were in the master's program for free because they'd been 4 years at Belhaven and graduated. And so, again, that decision came very, very quickly. Faculty were behind that. We opened a program in China. Faculty got behind it. It's about the culture you create of willingness to look for God's opportunities and capture those moments. It's not about saying, okay, now let's get out our whiteboards and let's just figure this thing out, because it doesn't work that way. When you're looking for God's opportunities, you got to move quick and you've got to be responsive. But God, in tough times, brings opportunities. If you're looking for them, you see them. If your head's down, focused on your plan, you'll never see them.
Mm. Amen, Dr. Parrott. I feel like I'm sitting at church getting a sermon, and we'll talk about this in your book. From time to time, you'd go speak to the football team, so we will
Well, there
circle
is that.
back.
I can't help
We'll
it.
circle back for that. But I feel like we've been teeing this up the whole time, Dr. Parrott. Let's talk about your book, Opportunity Leadership. Stop planning and start getting results. Dr. Parrott, with a title like that, one, it's catchy. Two, it probably gives a few folks who are wired a certain way some trepidation. What do you mean, no planning? So, Dr. Parrott, take us through the inspiration for this book and what's the central message you want readers
Yeah.
to take away?
I spent 20 years in higher ed in leadership as the vice president of the president doing traditional planning. And higher ed's very formulaic about how we do it. We appoint a blue ribbon committee. You put representatives of various parts of the campus on it. You tell them a year and a half to work. They come back with a plan. Those groups meet. I can tell you the plan before they ever have the first meeting. I can tell you what the outcome is because it's always the same. It's very, very predictable. And the most important thing is nothing comes out of it, nothing that moves the dial and makes anything better. And as leaders, we have gotten very dependent on corporate style planning instead of dependent on God for trusting for opportunities. And
Mm,
so in 2003, I got rid of planning, literally got rid. And then what I mean by planning is long range planning. We plan very carefully what we know God's told us to do. Yes, we are going to play football in 49 days from now. We are going to teach English. We are going to, our nursing program is going to go on. We plan those things carefully. What we don't plan are what I call God's destinations. We
mm,
don't, people will ask me, well, what's Belhaven going to look like in 5 years? And I say, I don't know. That's the only answer I can give you. But here's what I do know. I know that the best plan we could come up with around conference tables with whiteboards is pale in comparison to the plan that God has for us. And so we totally got rid of planning. You can come to our website, belhaven.edu. You will not find a long range plan. You'll not find a strategic plan. It does not exist. And that is scary for leaders because that's how we justify our value to our business or our nonprofit, or in my case, an educational institution. But here's the two things I know about planning. First of all, it doesn't work. It never works. I mean, the softball illustration is who had COVID in their plan? Nobody. Nobody had COVID in their plan. So every plan, every 5 year plan went out the window with COVID. It doesn't work because circumstances around us change. But more importantly than that, by planning, I think we settle for less than God's best for us.
mm,
It's because when we plan what we think will be a stretch with God's help, and then we pray over it, but we know we can do it. We never plan for something way beyond what we can do. And what I found once I get rid of planning is God has done things way, way, way beyond the best I could ever imagine. But I never would have planned it if I never would have hit those marks if we had stayed with planning. So it's really an abandonment of planning. Now, somebody's going to look at that and just say, no, you're crazy. No, don't be scared to death, and don't get rid of planning overnight. You're going to get fired if you do. There's a process. There's a way to do this. There's a way to build a culture. There's a way to structure and to build teams so you can create a culture to capture God's opportunities and really transition from a heavily dependence on planning to a dependence on God for opportunities.
mm. So huge. I love that. Dr. Parrott, there's so many places to go after reading the book. One of the stories that I enjoyed was the how the football team came about. You already mentioned how proud you were winning the conference last year, but Dr. Parrott, we know in academia and just schools in general how big of a deal it is to have athletics be a part of the institution, and especially a football program. And a lot of people don't even understand, which you do, of course, what even goes into um, adding that to the portfolio of the school when you think about the costs and construction and all that. So give a little insight to the readers on, to your point about not planning, how you all might have missed what God was doing by not leaning into that opportunity.
Yeah. Well, it's a fabulous story, and you're being a former football player, you can appreciate that. And I saw you played Georgia Tech. We played. We're Division III, which I love Division III because there are no scholarships. There's
Mm.
also no money in name, image, and likeness. You might get $20 from a car dealer, but that's about it. It's pure athletics the way it ought to be. But college football at any level is really tough. And I've had players go on to the NFL from Belhaven, so I know they can play at that level. But football is something that I had at the school where I'd been previously. I knew the value of college football, and Belhaven did not have football. But when I first came to Belhaven, we were doing the plan. We had the blue ribbon committee, the whole thing, whatever. I really wanted school to have football, but I knew it'd scare everybody to death, so I kind of buried that way down in the plan, one of those like third, fourth level, maybe what if someday possibly we might consider football kind of thing. And it got published in the plan that way and the whole thing. Well, when I was at my other school, just before I left, I had hired a coach who I really liked. And this guy was really sharp. He knew his X's and O's, but he also really believed in the discipleship opportunity of football and investing in young men's lives. And so I was had hired him, and then I moved down here to Mississippi and to Belhaven, and I was at like the second commencement or something, and I saw him in the foyer at the end of the commencement exercise. I said, "Hey, what are you doing here?" And he said, "I got fired, and this is home, so I came back home." I said, "You're kidding? You left them?" He said, "Yeah." I said, "Where are you coaching?" He said, "I'm not." And it just hit me. I said, "Well, would you like to start a football team?" Now, if he hadn't walked in the door and I hadn't been kind of in this process of giving up planning, we hadn't given it up at that point, but in the process of moving that direction, I never would have even seen the opportunity. I would have said, well, someday, somehow, maybe we want to consider football. But instead, it just kind of triggered. And I said, would you like to start a football team? And he said, I'd love to. And so we started in. Unfortunately, he got sick and he never was the coach, but God brought another coach out of the clear blue. And it was just one thing after another. And that's happened with our stadium. We have what many have told us is the nicest small college stadium in the country. It's a beautiful setting, and we don't even charge for our football games.
Wow.
It's a lot of fun to see how God takes a moment of capturing opportunity and does so much more with it when we don't even know how. But here's the thing about opportunity plan leadership. If in regular planning, we want to scope out every plus, every minus, every detour that could come before we ever make the decision. And in doing that, the opportunities are usually gone because we're so slow.
Mhm.
So in opportunity leadership, you've got to capture God's opportunity and move forward and say, yeah, let's start a football team and go the next step and go the next step. And if God closes that door, he closes that door. And then you back up at that point. But
Mm.
one of the things I teach my team is say yes until you have to say no. Keep saying yes until we hit a roadblock where we say, no, we just can't do that. And sometimes those come because they don't fit mission or finances or whatever it may be. But God, it's a great way to live. And I'll tell you, as a leader, it's a very freeing way to live because I'm not worried about the future or what's going to happen to Belhaven in 5 years. God's got this. I'm not responsible for it. I'm responsible for being a really good steward of what he's given me today.
Mm. So good. I'm ready to enroll right now, Dr. Parrott. One of the sections in the book, Dr. Parrott, that uh, that really helped me, and I believe it'll help others listening. You talk about the notion of embracing speed, and you were kind of talking about this without talking about it because there's so many unknowns out there in the marketplace and education, and but you really have to develop the mentality of embracing that speed. So just if you could highlight that for us, because you've already talked about like, hey, you could be missing something and to keep saying yes. So what was that further point you wanted to highlight about embracing that speed?
Well, what I've found is that usually almost always speed wins.
Mm,
So if you're slow, you're almost always going to lose. If you're fast, you got a pretty good chance of winning. And
yeah.
again, it's about creating that culture. So maybe we start into something and we get way down the road and God puts up a roadblock and we say, okay, that's not it. Let's stop. And that's okay. My crowd is comfortable with that because we've done that over and over. Too many leaders, once they announce something, they're afraid to make a change. Somehow I won't be seen as a good leader if I tell you we're looking at doing this and then we don't actually do it. And so that's why they're so slow to plot out every contingency, every problem, every budget, all the details of that before they ever make a decision. My approach is we're going to jump in, we're going to go fast, and we're going to move. And then if God backs it up, that's fine and that's okay. But speed usually wins, and that's hard, and it's hard for and I work with a lot of Christian ministries and churches, and it's hard for them too because there's kind of a DNA in them
Mhm.
of I call it they've kind of got a sloth DNA. You could surprise a sloth and he still can't jump out of the way in a hurry because their DNA won't allow him to move fast. And the church is somewhat like that. And it's a DNA of fear that any kind of change is going to bring a problem or difficulty or whatever it may be. It's a DNA of comfort. We're not all thrilled with what we got, but it's okay. And so we just settle for that. It's a DNA of intimidation that we can't do that. My company's not big enough. My reach isn't big enough. I don't have enough play. I can't do that. So we're intimidated by it. And it's a DNA of assumptions. We assume the worst is going to happen, the bad's going to happen, or whatever it may be. We've got to change that core of who we are in order to have speed. You can't just say one day we're going to move. You got to build it up. And so, I give illustration in the book of an illustration of what I call faster, and then fastest, and how we were able to make decisions. And that was a process. I mean, we changed our whole core curriculum once over 11 weeks. I opened a campus in China over a 4-month period one time. The speed got faster and faster and faster because the culture of my organization was comfortable with it, was used to it. But they also know that if God doesn't open that door, then we're going to back up, and that's okay. We had a wonderful opportunity, which we moved on a couple of years ago, to provide education to the 4 biggest prisons in Mississippi. And God opened up the door, remarkable connections with a warden who, great believers, a friend of Belhaven, and we were going to come in and do all this stuff. And we had the program ready to go. Financially, it was going to work, the whole thing. And we were down the road and we were moving fast like crazy on this thing. And the federal government didn't approve us for some reason. We don't know why, but it brought it to an end. And I told my crowd, look, God opened the door. We were ready to go. God closed the door. God's no is just as good as God's yes. So we celebrate that God is either protecting us or God's preparing us for something else. And that's okay. And when you create that kind of a culture, then you're comfortable with speed. If speed depends on, I can't, as a leader, bring you something and not come through with it, you'll never move fast because you'll be afraid to death to move.
Mm. It's all about the culture, folks.
It's all about the culture.
Dr.
And the
Pear.
culture,
Oh yeah, go
it's
ahead.
not about, it's not a opportunity leadership is not a technique or a style. It's a mindset. It's
Mm,
an
that's good.
outlook. It's a theology. It's a culture. It's all of that. And out of that, yeah, the book gives some techniques for how to implement it, but it really starts at your core. Do you either trust God or you're not?
Yeah.
We all preach. God is sovereign over all, but we don't act like he's sovereign over what we're responsible for. We feel like somehow he threw us the keys and we've got to do it. No, God's driving this car, not me.
Mm, he's in charge.
He is.
Dr. Parrott, where can people get a copy of Opportunity Leadership?
Well, I've got a website. It's called opportunityleadership.com. You can look at it there. I think you can get a chapter or something from it and some stuff about the book. Or Amazon. It's real easy to find, opporunityleadership. Uh, uh, but um, but yeah, love for people to who are interested. You know, I've had so many people contact me after they read the book and they said this freed me up. I never thought I could be here, or I've been trying to do this. I had one college president call me, tell me I stayed up all night reading your book, and for the first time, I'm not embarrassed. I don't have a plan. And so it does. It's very different from all the other leadership books that are out there because it really does advocate the freedom and the joy and the trust in God when you let go of planning.
Mm, so good. Folks, we'll have all of Dr. Parrott's information in the show notes, fortifiedlifepodcast.com. Dr. Parrott, before we get ready to go, you've obviously lived through a lot of things that God has done in your life. He's opened up doors, he's shown you different things. What was a major turning point for you in your life from a faith perspective?
I tell you, probably the biggest one was you know, I mean, I grew up in the church. My dad was a pastor and a college president. You know, I was in church all the time. Faith from a young age, and grew in faith. You know, very fortunate path. But I remember so clearly the moment after graduate school and had been a vice president of the school. I was with the Lausanne movement for a while and raised a bunch of money for a big conference we had in 1989 in Philippines. And after that, I had a number of offers to do things with a lot of big ministries and fundraisers and stuff. But I really wanted to look at it, being a college president. I don't know why. I guess family tradition. So I applied for about 6 schools, and I got turned down by some of the dumpiest little schools you've ever seen. And it was almost embarrassing because nobody was giving me a look at all. And I remember my wife and I were out walking one night and we said, you know, we don't have to do this to be fulfilled. God will use us in a different way. And let's not worry about it. Let's let the college presidency go and let's go plant a church. We were going to go out to Arizona and plant a church. And we thought that's what we'll do. And I tell you, within 2 months, I had 2 offers for college presidency. And I
Mm,
think God has to have us let go of our dreams so he can fulfill in us what he wants to do. And that level of letting go has stayed with me through my whole life and really guided me through so much of my growth and trust in him.
mm. That's good. Dr. Parrott, just wanted to thank you for hanging out with us here on the Fortified Life. We're going to get ready to let Dr. Parrott go. Ladies and gentlemen, you know how he is. He's going to continue doing what God has called him to do. But before you go, Dr. Parrott, you've given us a lecture per se, a motivation about opportunity leadership. Where can people go to learn more about you and Belhaven University?
Yeah, belhaven.edu with one L, Belhaven. And, you know, they can find out if you got a student interested in traditional higher ed, we live on campus and be in the arts or STEM or something. Those programs are there, 20 different graduate master's degrees and a doctorate in business and a doctorate in education for those who are interested in that. And all that stuff's all online, which is great. You can do it from any place you are. We've priced very affordable. We are priced right there with the most affordable public institutions. But the big difference is you get it taught from a foundation of faith in everything that we do, and you get it delivered to you with Christian care and love that is genuine. As we believe God and trust students to us, we want to invest in them. So yeah, belhaven.edu, best way to find me.
Ladies and gentlemen, Dr. Roger Parrott. Dr. Parrott, can't thank you enough for coming on the show. We'll have to do this again sometime in the future.
I'd love it. What a special treat for me. Thanks for all you're doing for the kingdom.
Absolutely. Well, folks, you know how we leave things here on the Fortified Life podcast. Don't compartmentalize your faith in the marketplace. And from the boardroom to the bathroom, God is with you. We'll see you next time on the Fortified Life podcast.